Dystopia, a mirror of the human condition. From the tyranny of reason to the erasure of memory, a dystopian fiction shows how society can collapse not only from violence but from obedience, efficiency, and even hope twisted into doctrine. But what is dystopia? What does it mean when something feels dystopian? It's not just darkness or ruin or corrupt authority. A dystopia is a blueprint of despair, a constructed world designed to reveal the fault lines of our own. In this video, I'll examine the core characteristics of dystopian fiction, each explored through a novel that doesn't just depict dystopia, but inhabits it. These are not just warnings, they are philosophies on what it means to be human in a dehumanized world. The first point that I'm going to address is the loss of free will, explored in the classic novel by Yevgeny Zamyatin's We. Set in a distant future, We takes place in the One State, a hyper-rational totalitarian society built on mathematical precision, surveillance, and the suppression of individuality. In this glass-walled world, citizens are known not by names, but by numbers. Our narrator is D503, a mathematician and the chief engineer of the Integral, a spaceship meant to export the ideals of the One State to the other planets. D503 is initially a loyal believer in the system and its leader, the benefactor. But his worldview begins to crumble when he meets I-330, a bold and mysterious woman who introduces him to forbidden pleasures, alcohol, sex without state sanction, and most dangerously, imagination. As D503 becomes emotionally and mentally unraveled, he discovers an underground resistance group that dreams of freedom and chaos, everything the One State has stamped out. We is argued to be the first modern dystopia. We predates Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World by decades. Written in 1920 and first published in English in 1924, it laid the blueprint for dystopian fiction as a political critique dressed in science fiction. It was the first novel to explore how rationalism, technology, and state control could be used to destroy the human soul. We is more than just an early dystopian novel. It is a prophetic warning, a literary innovation, and a fierce critique of systems that suppress individuality in the name of perfection. It asks, what is lost when we trade freedom for order? And it answers, everything that makes us human. The next characteristic I have chosen is total surveillance and linguistic control, evidenced in Orwell's 1984. The book opens with one of the best known lines in literature history. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. 1984 is set in a grim, post-war future where the world is divided into three superstates perpetually at war: Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia. The story takes place in Airstrip 1, formerly Britain, ruled by the totalitarian regime of Big Brother and the All-Seeing Party. The protagonist, Winston Smith, works at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to falsify historical records to align with the party's ever-changing narrative. Despite appearing outwardly loyal, Winston is inwardly rebellious, harboring memories of a different past and questioning the party's version of reality. Orwell didn't just critique dictatorship, he anatomized it. 1984 shows how a state could rule not just through violence, but by controlling language, thought, and even reality itself. The book became a standard against which all dystopias are measured. Terms like Big Brother, doublethink, newspeak, and thought crime entered the global lexicon as tools of political critique. In 1984, language is a weapon. At the heart of the story is newspeak, a simplified language designed to eliminate complex thought. By removing words like freedom, the party removes even the possibility of rebellion. It's one of the most profound literary explorations of linguistic control and how language limits thought. Its genius lies in showing how reality itself can be rewritten. The party doesn't just change the past, it makes people believe there never was another past. The line 2 + 2 = 5 becomes the ultimate symbol of forced orthodoxy and the destruction of objective truth. We cannot dismiss 1984's long-lasting cultural impact. Written in 1948 and published in 1949, 1984 was Orwell's response to Stalinist Russia, Nazi Germany, and the growing rise of propaganda in democratic societies. Yet its warning has not only become more relevant in the age of mass surveillance, fake news, and algorithmic manipulation, 1984 shows how power functions not merely through violence, but through the manipulation of truth, history, and mind. It forces us to ask questions that still hold relevance today. Who controls the past? What is truth if it's owned by the state? Can freedom survive in a world where even thought is policed? My next characteristic of dystopian fiction is the commodification of emotion, represented in Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. Set in an alternate version of late 20th century England, Never Let Me Go follows three friends, Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy, as they grow up in a mysterious and idyllic boarding school called Halisham. At first glance, the children's lives seem normal. They study art, read poetry, they form crushes, and struggle with the emotional turbulence of adolescence. But as you read the book, you will start to notice that something is off about this place. As Kathy narrates the story with quiet detachment, the truth is slowly revealed. The students of Halisham are clones, created and raised for one purpose, to donate their organs to non-cloned humans. There is no escape. Their fate is predetermined. They will complete after a series of donations, usually in their 20s or early 30s. What makes this novel so chilling is not violence or rebellion, but its absence. There are no fences, no riots, no villains. The children are gently raised, taught art, and encouraged to express their souls, only for that emotional richness to make their eventual harvesting more poignant. As their friends grow older, they search for meaning. Kathy becomes a carer, looking after donors until she too must begin her own donation cycle. Tommy and Ruth navigate jealousy, regret, and a desperate attempt to believe in a myth that if two clones are truly in love, they can be granted a deferral. It is, of course, false. In the end, Kathy reflects on what has passed, not with anger, but with wistful resignation. She accepts her fate. There is no rebellion, just a quiet sorrow. This is a dystopia without resistance. Unlike most dystopian novels, Never Let Me Go doesn't feature totalitarian regimes or surveillance or war. Its horror lies in passivity. In a society that has accepted the unthinkable as normal, there are no guns, there are no guards, just emotional grooming that makes the clones more docile and their suffering more poetic. It's oppression by care. Halisham's students are encouraged to draw, write, and love, not because they are seen as human, but because the outside world wants proof that clones have souls. Emotion becomes a currency. Love, pain, and longing, these are not liberating, but harvested. The clones are emotionally enriched only so their eventual sacrifice feels more tragic and more justified. So in the story, emotion isn't forbidden, it's actually being refined, extracted, and consumed. Ishiguro defies dystopian conventions by removing all protest. Kathy's voice is gentle, restrained, and heartbreakingly calm. The soft tone intensifies the horror because the reader yearns for anger that never comes. The characters accept their fate not because they lack intelligence, but because they've been conditioned to believe this is all they're worth. Like all great science fiction, it holds a mirror to the real world. The world of Never Let Me Go reflects real debates about genetic engineering, the ethics of cloning, and the commodification of bodies, particularly those deemed less than. It echoes how society often romanticizes suffering, especially among the marginalized, as long as it serves a purpose for others. The greatest tragedy is that Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy are fully human. They feel joy, grief, betrayal, desire, and nostalgia, yet the system doesn't care. Their lives raise an impossible question. What is the value of a soul in a world that refuses to protect it? Never Let Me Go is a dystopia of softness and sorrow. It's not a world destroyed by fire, but by acceptance. In its silence, it screams. In its beauty, it mourns. It warns us that love, memory, and emotion are not immune to commodification, and that the most insidious systems are those that make people complicit in their own erasure. My next characteristic is found in one of my all-time favourite books. I'm talking about the collapse of nature and language in The Road by Cormac McCarthy. In the book, McCarthy strips the world to ash and to silence. The novel follows an unnamed man and boy trudging through a post-apocalyptic America. The land is burned, the skies are grey, and the forests are skeletal. There are no animals, no crops, no sun, just cold, ash, and extinction. They are travelling south toward the coast with a small cart of supplies and almost no hope. The world is populated by the desperate and the monstrous, roving bands of cannibals, thieves, and people reduced to instinct. The father teaches the boy how to hide, how to run, how to avoid fire-lit roads. The danger is the despair. As they journey, the boy becomes a symbol of purity, of compassion, and meaning in a world where all such things have collapsed. The father tells him that they are carrying the fire, a metaphor for moral endurance, memory, and humanity. This is a world without nature. Unlike many apocalyptic novels, The Road offers no explanation for the disaster. There are no flashbacks, no origin story, just silence and ash. The earth is dead. The trees collapse in the wind. There are no seasons, no cycles, no animals. The boy has never seen a living bird. McCarthy's prose is famously minimal. There are no quotation marks, few adjectives, and no names. The dialogue is often terse, repetitive, reduced to raw function. Language, like nature, is dying. The characters speak in broken patterns, unfinished sentences. The old world's words, those tied to beauty, abundance, and culture, have vanished with the trees. And in this dystopia, even memory is fading too. Yet the father keeps speaking. He tells stories. He names things. He breathes meaning into the meaningless. For his son's sake, in a world where nothing grows, language becomes the last act of cultivation. McCarthy's genius lies in what he leaves unsaid. The father and son are never named, because in this world, names don't matter anymore. There are no chapters, just fragments, like cracked stone tablets. But beneath the minimalism is immense tenderness. The father's love for his son is all-consuming, even as his health declines. Their small rituals, sharing food and telling stories, become acts of resistance against oblivion. In summary, The Road is a novel about what happens after the end, after civilization, after nature, after words. It is a novel where language is a last ember, not of survival, but of meaning. A beautiful line from the story: "When one has nothing left, make ceremonies out of the air and breathe upon them." Next, let's look into themes of rewriting history and time. Set in the far, far future, so distant that Earth is now called Earth and the sun is dying, the Book of the New Sun follows Severian, an apprentice in the Guild of Torturers. After showing mercy to a prisoner, Severian is exiled and sent to a distant city to take up a new post. His journey becomes a cosmic pilgrimage through a decaying world filled with forgotten technologies, strange creatures, ancient artifacts, and war-torn cities. Severian, who claims to have a perfect memory, recounts his life in the style of a confession or memoir. But his narrative is unreliable, full of lapses and strange time folds and contradictions. Earth is a planet at the end of time. Technology is mistaken for magic. Languages have changed so much that ancient artifacts are misunderstood relics. Time has broken down. Civilization has rotted. The past is myth, and truth is inaccessible. This is a dystopia as cosmic memory loss. At first glance, the Book of the New Sun seems like sword and sorcery, guilds, castles, monsters, but it is in fact hard science fiction wearing the mask of myth. The monsters are bioengineered hybrids, the gods are aliens or time travelers, the relics are ancient technologies. Wolfe reverses the usual sci-fi dystopia. Here, science is forgotten, and its decay has birthed a new medievalism. Despite its darkness, Wolfe's series is not nihilistic. Severian's journey is not to destroy the world, but to heal it, to bring a new sun that can reverse death and decay. Where other dystopias warn against collapse, Wolfe imagines a resurrection through suffering, a renewal through myth and sacrifice. The Book of the New Sun is a labyrinthine masterpiece, part science fiction, part theology, part puzzle. It imagines a world where history has eroded. Time is a spiral, and meaning must be rediscovered through suffering, language, and myth. Severian's tale is not just a hero's journey, it is a study on what it means to remember, to misremember, and to carry the past into a future that has forgotten itself. No book puts a spotlight on the dystopian tropes of reproduction control more than The Handmaid's Tale. Set in the near-future totalitarian state of Gilead, a Christian fundamentalist regime that has overthrown the US government. Following environmental collapse and widespread infertility, Gilead responds with a return to biblical values, imposing a brutally hierarchical and patriarchal society. Gilead is not just a dictatorship, it is a biopolitical theocracy where reproduction is state property. Women's bodies are not their own. They are vessels assigned based on fertility. The ritual of impregnation, or the ceremony, is clinical, emotionless, and religiously choreographed. Love, desire, and motherhood are stripped of agency and turned into duty. Reproduction is no longer personal, it's political, weaponized as a tool of population control and social order. The horror of Gilead doesn't rely on stormtroopers or constant surveillance alone. It relies on indoctrination, ritual, and women policing women. Aunts train young girls to be obedient handmaids. Wives enforce the system out of jealousy and fear. Even Offred at times finds herself accepting, even romanticizing, her captors. Tyranny here succeeds not just by dominating people, but by making them accept their roles within it. Atwood famously said she included nothing in the novel that hadn't already happened somewhere in history. Forced childbearing, arranged marriages, banned literacy, and theocratic violence are real, lived experiences, just recombined into a near-future America. This grounds the novel in a chilling plausibility. Gilead is not a fantasy, it's a warning. The Handmaid's Tale is a searing explanation of what happens when women's bodies are reproduced to state property, when faith is twisted into tyranny, and when language, love, and memory become acts of violence. In Gilead, the horror lies in the normalization of oppression, the slow boiling of freedom into silence. A quick side note, there's another book called Oryx and Crake, also by Margaret Atwood, which is another brilliant dystopian novel exploring ideas of bioengineering and post-human capitalism and the death of natural world, the dehumanization of science. So go check that one out too if you enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale. My next choice explores collective memory and cultural erasure in The Memory Police. Set on an unnamed island under authoritarian rule, The Memory Police follows a woman who works as a novelist. On this island, things disappear. Not just physically, but from the memory of its residents. One day it's hats, another it's birds, perfume, or ribbons. Once something disappears, it's illegal to remember it. People obediently burn the items, remove them from their homes, and feel their connection to them fade from their minds. Enforcing these disappearances is the mysterious, faceless force known as the Memory Police, who arrest and banish anyone who resists, especially those who still remember. The narrator discovers that her editor, R, can still remember the disappeared things. She hides him in a secret room in her home, helping him survive as more and more of the world is erased. As the novel progresses, language and body parts and eventually memory itself begin to vanish. The narrator's own ability to write her last form of resistance begins to dissolve. The novel ends with a haunting, ambiguous fade into silence. This is not a dystopia of violence or war, it is a dystopia of compliance, where people accept forgetting as natural. There are no grand speeches or riots, only passivity. Once something has disappeared, the loss becomes emotionally hollow. The trauma is subtle and unmarked. Cultural memory is fragile, and its erasure can be quiet, bureaucratic, and even welcomed, especially when people are trained to forget. As objects vanish from memory, so does part of the self. Each disappearance removes emotional associations, the feeling of wearing a hat, the sound of a bird, the scent of perfume, the narrator herself begins to lose her ability to write, as language and sensation dissolve. Without memory, creativity weakens. Identity itself begins to unravel. This dystopia portrays a world disappearing, the vanishing of art, language, and the body. As the disappearances escalate, language begins to fail. The narrator's prose falters, descriptions flatten, her own body starts to dissolve, as if even existence itself is being forgotten. She writes a novel within the novel, about a typist trapped in a tower, whose voice and body are slowly stolen, mirroring her own fate. The Memory Police is a haunting study on what it means to forget. It shows how language, art, memory, and the soul can be erased, not through violence, but through absence and compliance. Yōko Ogawa crafts a dystopia not of force, but of fading, where people smile as they burn the things that once defined them. My next choice is the theme of bureaucratic absurdity and moral collapse, seen in The Trial by Franz Kafka. One morning, Joseph K., an ordinary bank clerk, is arrested without explanation. He is told he has been charged with an unspecified crime, but the authorities will not tell him what he is accused of. He is not imprisoned, yet remains under a vague form of surveillance and control. As he navigates an opaque and surreal legal system, filled with labyrinthine courtrooms, overworked lawyers, unreadable officials, and contradictory procedures, Joseph K. becomes increasingly frantic. His efforts to defend himself only entangle him further into absurd, self-perpetuating bureaucracy. I won't spoil the ending other to say it's a profoundly bleak and hard-hitting conclusion. In this dystopia, bureaucracy is the face of modern tyranny. Unlike totalitarian dystopias ruled by charismatic leaders or violent enforcers, Kafka gives us a system that is faceless, unaccountable, and absurd. There is no one to fight, no truth to uncover, no law to appeal to. Every official that K meets is uninformed, contradictory, or powerless. The horror of the trial is not cruelty, it's meaninglessness. The system functions without justice, only inertia. One of the most famous elements of the novel is that Joseph K. never finds out what he's accused of, and no one seems to think that matters. He is consumed with the question, what did I do? But guilt in Kafka's world is existential, not legal. He is guilty because he exists within the system, and the system presumes guilt. The trial becomes not a path to justice. Kafka's prose is clean, unemotional, even mundane, but what it describes is surreal and nightmarish. Courtrooms are found in attics. Judges appear behind curtains. Conversations turn in circles. Every official references someone else. Every step forward leads to greater confusion. The more K tries to make sense of the world, the less sense it makes. This is absurdism. With some alarming comparison to the world today, the trial highlights a collapse of moral certainty. K is not a moral hero. He is self-important and vain and often arrogant. His downfall is not just the system, it's also his own refusal to change, to empathize, or to imagine anything outside his narrow worldview. Kafka offers no comfort, no guard, no grand resistance, no redemption arc. The trial ends with silence. The system wins, not because it is strong, but because it requires nothing but submission. When systems become impenetrable, morality becomes irrelevant. Right and wrong dissolve into procedures and paperwork. Kafka is showing us a control through confusion. The trial is not a dystopia of grand tyrannies, but of invisible ones, the kind that smother you in paperwork and purposelessness. It is a world where guilt has no source, authority has no face, and death comes not with meaning, but with a shrug. The next characteristic I'll be discussing is infertility as existential dystopia in Children of Men. Set in the year 2021, The Children of Men imagines a world in terminal decline. For reasons unknown, no child has become born in 25 years. Humanity has become infertile, and the youngest generation, known as the Omegas, are now in their 20s, idolized and also feared. Civil liberties have quietly collapsed, but there is no uprising because there is nothing to fight for. The novel is narrated by Theodore, or Theo, Farron, a disillusioned Oxford historian and cousin to Zan. After years of apathy, he is approached by Julian, a member of a small rebel group called the Five Fishes. She reveals a miracle, that she is pregnant. As Thea becomes involved in their effort to protect Julian and her unknown child, the novel transforms from a quiet resignation to desperate flight, and finally to the possibility of rebirth. Rather than depicting a world ravaged by war, climate change, or plague, James imagines a gentle apocalypse, one of sterility. No children, no laughter, no schools, the toys remain untouched, hope has withered not from fire but with absence. This premise reshapes the dystopian genre. It's not a struggle to survive, it's a struggle to matter when the future is gone. James writes, "It was reasonable to struggle, to suffer, perhaps even to die, for a more just, a freer, a happier world, but not for nothing." The novel is loaded with societal despair and apathy. In this childless world, society appears calm, even elegant, but beneath the surface lies deep moral rot. The elderly are discarded, migrants are exploited as disposable labour, citizens attend quieter ceremonies, mass drownings of the aged, not with horror, but detachment. The population has grown used to living without meaning, trading freedom for comfort and resignation for peace. When the truth is lost, despair becomes policy and people stop imagining alternatives. But there is a hope in this dystopia, represented in the possibility of a rebirth. When Julian becomes pregnant, she represents the return of meaning. Her pregnancy is not widely celebrated because it's dangerous. It must be hidden, protected, nurtured in secrecy. The world is not ready for joy. Theo, once a passive observer, finds purpose in protecting this fragile hope, and in doing so, reclaims his own humanity. In a dead world, the possibility of new life is revolutionary. Finally, let's talk about censorship and intellectual repression in Fahrenheit 451. In a future society where books are outlawed, Guy Montag is a fireman, not a saviour, but an enforcer. His job is to burn books and the homes that contain them. The government has decided that books cause confusion, discontent, and unhappiness, and thus must be destroyed for the public good. Montag lives a shallow, contented life with his emotionally numb wife, Mildred, who spends her days lost in virtual television families. But everything begins to unravel when he meets Clarice, a young, inquisitive girl who asks questions no one else does, like, "Are you happy?" This encounter sparks a crisis in Montag. He begins to question the purpose of the work, his marriage, and his world. He secretly begins to read the books that he wants destroyed. Eventually, he is forced to flee the city and join a secret group of book people, outcasts who have memorized entire works of literature to preserve them for a future society. In the book, we are looking at censorship as self-inflicted decay. Bradbury's dystopia doesn't present a government that burns books to control information, but a society that chooses to stop reading. Over time, the public became obsessed with speed, entertainment, and comfort. Books were first shortened, then banned, not out of oppression, but out of disinterest. Censorship in this world is not top-down authoritarianism, it's cultural decay, born from laziness and fear of discomfort. Repression begins not with the state, but with a society that stops asking questions. There is a war on critical thinking in the story. The books in Fahrenheit 451 aren't just banned, they are feared. They represent contradiction, discomfort, ambiguity, things modern society has rejected in favour of bland uniformity. People want happiness, not truth. Firemen don't just burn pages, they burn questions. The culture is saturated with noise and distraction, replacing thought with stimulation. The true learning, true reflection becomes dangerous. It's holding a bit of a mirror to modern societies too, with its representation of media addiction and numbness. Mildred represents the average citizen, lost in screens, dulled by pills, terrified of silence. She spends her life immersed in interactive parlour walls, massive television screens that simulate family life. She avoids conversation, books, and even thought. Bradbury predicted not just censorship, but the numbing effect of constant entertainment, long before smartphones or social media. The most effective repression doesn't come from force, but from a population that willingly forgets. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to question to worry him. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. What is so clever about the book is that it uses fire as a metaphor reversed. Fire, at first, is seen as destruction, the flames that burn libraries, minds, and ideas. But by the end of the novel, fire becomes a symbol of warmth and light, no longer to erase, but to sustain life. Montag's journey is one from annihilation to illumination. Fahrenheit 451 is a dystopia not of violence but of voluntary ignorance. It warns us that the greatest danger to thought is not authoritarianism alone, but a society that chooses comfort over complexity. Bradbury didn't just predict censorship, he foresaw the drowning of culture in noise. Dystopias differ in setting, glass cities, burnt highways, decaying worlds, but they all ask the same question: what happens when the systems we trust most betray us? Some dystopias kill with brutality, others smother with politeness. Some use religion, others reason, and some don't need anything but silence. But in all of them, a single spark remains of memory, of fire, and of love. The future may not be written, but it is being read.